when a huge white pine tree snaps in half in the forest, and the only one there is a 7-year-old kid, it still makes a noise. And you can taste the vaporized pine pitch out of the air. I was one of those kids that spent all day playing by himself in the forest, and when I was about 9, I helped my dad build a cabin in Guilford, Vermont, with wood from the place. Wood that was cut by a one-eyed sawmill operator, Austin Tobias. 8.5 fingers, a hip flask, and no two boards were the same. Somehow my dad stitched this irregular lumber into a square and true building. A friend once said to me, Carl, my dad, he doesn't need a plumb bob. He is a plumb bob. Case in point, one time he cut down this most gigantic hemlock tree, and he stressed and fussed and sweated over the cut, and it started to come down, of course, right where he wanted it, but slowly at first and then accelerated, coming down through autumn trees, and it hit the ground, and it throbbed the earth beneath my feet. And I looked up and saw countless red and gold autumn leaves spiraling slowly earthward in a lingering psychedelic snowfall. And those logs were drawn from the woods one at a time by Nellie Howe, driving what would seem to be a mismatched team of horses. Yeah, oh no, and some cuss words I wasn't familiar with. Nellie was 5 feet of piss and vinegar. And one time she challenged me to eat one of her homemade pickles. These were those huge garlicky dills that came out of a crock. You can't blink though, she says. Smelly sneakers, cut-off shorts, and a NASA t-shirt. I stood there and I stared her down, and I ate that whole thing and I never blinked. Nellie, her husband Stubby, son Buster, Austin Tobias, the wood guy, and Carl. These were mysteries to me in my childhood, as were the mushrooms. One time I saw a log covered with this white slime, and at night it glowed an eerie green color. There were white ones that would turn black and liquefy and then just run back into the soil. And those that attracted flies and smelled so fetid, like a rent-by-the-hour motel room. Inspiration comes when it comes. Mozart was 4, and Whistler was 80. And I say anywhere in between is fair game. So in my 50s, I moved back into that cabin, and I started to really learn about mushrooms. One time, walking by a nearby pond, I saw these orange trumpets. Could those be chanterelles, I wondered. I took some, compared them to my field guide. No, those are laughing Jims, so-called because they make you hallucinate. And then you die. Undaunted, I kept looking for chanterelles, and one time I found this tiny little thing, and I brought it up to my nose, and I smelled it, and it smelled of apricots, and it was my first Shanti, and so it was with chocolatey morels, and pheasantback's watermelon aroma, and the unmistakable lobster scent of lion's mane. And so a couple years ago, I cut down several hundred hardwood logs. These are short logs called bolts. I enlisted my neighbor Dave, and together we drilled some 4,000 holes in those logs, and we stuffed them full of mushroom mycelium called spawn. And then I waited 9 months, a year, and a year and a half go by. And I have to resign myself to failure. About then, I run into Dave on the dirt road that we live on, and he says, "Hey," in his best I was born in Springfield, Mass, but trying to talk like a Vermonter accent. "Anything ever come of those mushrooms?" Dejected, we went our ways. I walked back up the hill to my cabin, and as I did, ritualistically walked through my would-be mushroom farm in the woods and glanced at the logs. And that's when I saw it. The shiitakes were pinning, sprouting, budding, and the namekos were golden and slick on top, and the oysters were prolific and huge. Everything was popping. And I reached down and I cut off some oysters, and I brought them up, and they were steely gray, strangely heavy, and perfect. What alchemy is this that turns a tree into a thing? It's not a plant. It's not an animal. What alchemy turns decay into meal of the day? And I turn those oysters over. They smell of anise. And I reason, that's a lot better than pine pitch. And recently, I'm over at Dave's. I'm buying some lumber from him, dimensionally correct lumber. And he points out this huge white oak behind his house. And I look up into its leafless canopy, and using something I guess I would describe as mushroom vision, I see 40, 50, 60 bolts of hardwood up there. And I'm quick to volunteer to Dave, hey, I'll help you cut down that tree, and I'll take some of that lesser firewood away from you. Dave says, hey, now tell me, where is it that I get that mushroom spawn?